Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan, and welcome to my live stream. We're on March 12th, Wednesday at 1 p.m. We did a live stream just a few days ago on Sunday, but there's so much happening that I think that it's really important to stay in touch, and I want to address questions and issues. And if you're new to my live streams or my work, just understand my specialization is psychology, in particular, the whole topic of brainwashing, mind control, radicalization, as well as helping people to recover when they're exiting a mind control experience or cult. Families hire me to coach them on how to help a loved one who's experienced a radicalization. And as you know, many of you know, I've written The Cult of Trump in 2019. It was re-released last September with a foreword from George Conway and an afterword by myself. And we are living in a moment of history where just everyone is shaking their heads going, I can't believe what's happening. But we need to get out of denialism and wishful thinkingism and understand the forces that are being used to dismantle the United States federal government. And it's interesting, I saw a post, someone used Elon Musk's Grok to ask, what's the likelihood that Donald Trump is a Russian asset? And it was 85%. And having talked with former KGB official Yuri Shvets, myself, in a 2021 interview, he stated categorically that he was in the KGB when Donald Trump was recruited. And I believe there's a new book coming out called Collusion that has even more data about that. It's very hard for Americans to wrap their head around the idea that a foreign adversary who's a cruel, heartless dictator who murdered his opposition person, Alexander Navalny, is the puppet master for the President of the United States of America. But that's what I think is happening, people. And I'm heartened to see widespread protests, not only in every state of the United States, but also around the world, as Trump aligned himself with Putin against Ukraine. And that horrible meeting with Zelensky. And the world order is getting reshuffled. And what I want to state categorically is that we need to stay true to our values, that we are moral people, most of us, that just because there are criminals that are being pardoned and let out of jail for the January 6th attack, a violent attack, we should not align ourselves with that criminal philosophy of, well, they're doing it, we should do it too. I don't really subscribe to that, although we really need to think ahead to what the Heritage Foundation Project 2025 was outlining, because it's pretty much being followed through on. There's many, many more things I want to talk about. I know that the Mike Johnson pushed through a budget proposal so the U.S. government doesn't go bankrupt. That's now going to be debated in the Senate. And honestly, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm really not a political person, although I'm definitely for human rights and freedom, and do not like when people are using mind control propaganda techniques to usurp people's ability to think for themselves, which is why I continue to do my work. I continue to want to remain hopeful that more people will step up saying, what do we do, Steve? And I've been messaging, the first thing is just understand psychological warfare, understand My influence continuum, for example, the graphic that you can download for free on freedomofmind.com that talks about ethical influence to unethical influence, and my bite model of authoritarian control, and start educating yourself, your family, and your loved ones, and everyone that you know, and learn how to talk effectively to people who believe Trump is God's agent or believe that Trump is going to do something good for America. Because I've been saying all along that many, many, many millions of people are going to be waking up from the Trump trance and saying, how could I have trusted him? How could have I believed in him? And we want to welcome these folks, and we want not to alienate them or stigmatize them. And we want them to get angry with their GOP politicians and Trump, and we want them to lead the protests. I see I already have a question. Margaret Jones, what do you think about James Carville telling the Democrats to sit back and watch the GOP collapse in a month and not to get involved? I think James Carville's wrong, wrong, wrong. He doesn't get it. He should have read my book. He's thinking like someone who's run campaigns in the past. We're in the digital age, my friends, and psychological mimetic warfare using the internet and the media is what's happening right now. And understanding who's trustworthy in terms of sources of information, learning how to reality test, learning how to regulate your emotional states so you don't get triggered all the time, especially when you're trying to speak with a family member or friend who is defending the actions of Trump. And I find it fascinating to see Steve Bannon, who is a criminal, who was pardoned by Trump, talking about how evil Elon Musk is. And it's so interesting for me to hear from people who I consult with to say that their loved one is now against Musk, and still aligned with the war room of Bannon. But we have bigger fish to fry here, people. We need to reclaim our value system, that it's not okay to lie, that there's no such thing as alternative facts, that science matters, there's a measles epidemic, and we need to vaccinate Americans to stop the spread of this heinous disease. I can go on and on. I see a question here. Marie says, Dr. Hassan, what do you wish people would ask you? Thank you. Your books helped me deprogram from Opus Dei. So Opus Dei is very important for you to learn about, you meaning the listeners of this. I interviewed Gareth Gore, the author of a fabulous book called Opus, about Opus Dei. And if you want to understand the large co-opting of the American political process, study Opus Dei's influence on the Supreme Court through Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society, and Opus Dei's influence on the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025. Opus Dei was involved with the Manhattan Declaration, that for the first time they made a pact with Protestants, and they used to hate each other, the Protestants and the Catholics. They made a pact to go after gay rights, women's rights, and democratic institutions years ago. And they want to push theocracy. They want to abolish human rights and sectarianism, women's rights, gay rights, trans rights, indigenous rights, rights of minority religions. They wanted to abolish the separation of church and state. And unfortunately, myself, people like Frederick Clarkson, people like Dave Troy, and many others have been saying, hello, this is what's happening, pay attention. And while we've gained some followership, not really the traction that's necessary with the big influencers and the folks who have the money to counter all the billionaires that have been deceptively recruited by Opus Dei and other authoritarian libertarian cults. But we can get it together. We have to get it together. If we want planetary survival, if we want to care about our children and our grandchildren and about the earth, we have to get it together. It's an emergency. Let's see. Claire Jacobson, Elon Musk is crying on Fox about how much money and customers his businesses have lost. I saw that. How do you feel about this? I'm happy that he's starting to realize that people are turning on him, that he's not the golden boy, and that people are getting rid of their Tesla cars. And regarding Trump saying it's domestic terrorism that people vandalize Tesla dealerships, um, I don't know. I think going into schools with assault rifles and shooting children indiscriminately is more on the domestic terrorism side than people who are vandalizing property. Just me. But I think it's really important to realize Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos, all of these people who are kissing Trump's ring and agreeing with his lie that that Biden didn't win the 2020 election, which was overwhelmingly proven, or that January 6th was a walk in the park and wasn't a violent attempt to make a coup. Anyone who believes that is in the cult of Trump. And when I say anyone who believes that, they may not internally believe it. They may be publicly agreeing to be loyal to Trump because they are ideologically being influenced, because they're being paid off, or because they're being blackmailed. Those are the three big motivations for people to violate their own value system and the value system of the United States of America, to go against the Constitution, to go against the principles of separation of powers, and that each branch of government should function to have a check on power, not to kiss the ring in the pyramid of the Trump administration. That's autocracy. That's fascism. And it's not okay. And for the world order to see Trump doing what he's doing is shocking to them. I see Tim Jones as a teacher. I'm worried about how the GOP is destroying the Department of Education. Yeah, I read that half of the Department of Education has been fired. And Tim is asking, how do we navigate this and encourage knowledge amidst an administration that encourages ignorance? The Christian right has been pushing for homeschooling and for charter schools where they want taxpayer money to pay for their indoctrination of their children to not believe in science, to not study history, to not study the civil rights movement, to not study the history of women's liberation. Like, in order to have a functioning society, we need educated people. However, if you're thinking as an autocrat and a fascist, you want people to be uneducated. You want people not to be able to think and question and challenge authority. You want people to be cowered into obedience thinking. Let's see, Leslie Nuss, can you put together a 3-day decult program to help break this cult bond? Well, on an individual level, that's what I've done for decades, but I typically get hired by the family and friends. I spend 2 days with them first, educating them and coaching them on how to communicate effectively. And then we need to get the person to voluntarily agree to not be in touch with the cult during those 3 days, and to listen and to sleep and to reflect on things so that they can think for themselves. When we're looking at millions of Americans, we need to think on a much more complex systems level. And my solution, having studied complex systems, is we need to organize former members of cults, people who've escaped dictatorships, to come to the United States, who understand what it's like to live under authoritarianism and such. We need to mobilize people to start sharing their story in an effective, coherent way. And for me, the simplest way to help explain is using the influence continuum model and the bite model. And I do have a free anonymous survey at bitemodel.com that you can do a shortened survey of behavior control, information, thought, and emotional control. And we want people basically destigmatizing the notion that you have to be stupid or ignorant to ever get deceived into a mind control cult. Because a lot of people in the cult of Trump are very smart and they're educated, but they've been entirely indoctrinated into this black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil ideology. And many of them are in religious cults that are authoritarian, like New Apostolic Reformation and Opus Dei, and many other authoritarian cults. So what I can say definitively is that what works is not to attack the group that they're in directly. Don't attack Trump directly, the administration, the policies directly. Talk about brainwashing in China. Let's use the models by former American military specialists, of which my model is based on. Or let's talk about pimps and traffickers and the techniques they use, and talk about the bite model, etc., and ask questions in a respectful, warm, curious way to empower people to start thinking and not just be in a silo, emotional silo. Back to the Musk. People don't understand, when you're somebody like a Musk, you want people to like you. You don't want people to be upset with you. You think you're a great person and you're brilliant and you're doing such good. And saying, to him he's evil and he's terrible is not going to help him reflect. But reminding him that he was pro alternative energy, anti fossil fuel, like the planet is warming up, climate change is a fact, overwhelming fact. Anyone who knows engineering, anyone who knows science, anyone who has eyes can see. And dismantling the entities that tell us about the weather, or dismantling the CDC that talks about transmittable viruses and stuff, that's not going to make the problem go away. It's just going to keep us in the dark to understand what's happening and how to protect ourselves. And this is the opposite of what needs to happen for people to remain safe. And so what I'm trying to convey is that there are methods, and I'm a one guy. I mean, I know a lot. I have 50 years of experience full time on this, but there are many of my colleagues who are also really smart and educated. We need to create a ground up group of experts, and we really need to think strategically about who is the enemy, what is their objectives, how are they doing it, and what can we do to preventively educate more people from getting under their spell, to help stimulate people to exit these authoritarian mind traps and recover and be part of an overwhelming move for planetary survival. I see Neuropilot. Opus Dei members were involved in the Robert Hansen fiasco. The former FBI agent member. So was FBI Director Louis Freeh. Hansen was spying for the Russians. That's right. He was in charge of the U.S. CIA, I think the U.S. FBI counterterrorism unit against Russia, and he was Opus Dei. And guess what? William Barr is Opus Dei. And he was in charge of Hansen and said Opus Dei had nothing to do with it. And if you believe that, I have a very cheap bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. I'll sell it to you for $5 if you want to believe that one. So understand that religious cults are very convenient proxy groups for state actors like Russia, China, and the CIA to do stuff, but have some distance from saying, oh, it's us doing it. And America's hands is not clean. We've done a lot of dirty stuff supporting dictators, overthrowing democratic elected officials in other countries over the decades. So I want to be clear that it's not all or nothing. However, there are a lot of good people, moral people, ethical people sworn to uphold the Constitution, and this goes for our military as well. And I have to put all of my hope and my bets that good people are not going to just be complacent or put their head in a hole, but they're going to protest. They're going to do things, sacrifice their time, their energy, their money to avert this catastrophe that's befalling us. Let's see. Karen Cooney says, Dr. Hassan, how do you think Republicans in the House and Senate are squaring their consciences with all the harm Trump's agenda is causing people in the U.S. and worldwide? I think they're being influenced. They're in a silo. So what I want people to understand is these people have family, friends, professional contacts who should be interacting and asking questions to stimulate the dissonance between what they know to be true and what their actions are in the cult of Trump. And it may mean that they give up their political station because they'll be, Musk will give money against their opponent next time. But there may not be another election if Trump declares martial law and the courts issue verdicts, but the Justice Department of officials that have sworn loyalty to Trump don't enforce these decisions. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. All I know is, as a therapist, I always tell my clients, think about what's within your circle of influence, your circle of control, and focus on things you can do something about, and don't spend a lot of time ruminating on things that we can't do anything about. So I see a lot of people selling their Teslas. I see people protesting on the street. And guess what? GOP people who were told to have town meetings stopped having town meetings because they were hearing from their constituents about how upset they are that they're losing their jobs or they're losing the funds that they expected to grow their crops from USAID money, for example. I see Always Marco. Hey, Steve, I recently learned about Hasbara, Israel's public communication strategy. Can you tell me if this is just propaganda meant to advance Zionism? Do other countries have a similar thing? I actually, Marco, I have not heard about Hasbara, but I put Netanyahu in the Cult of Trump book because when Trump was initially elected in 2016, I thought to myself, there's no way in the world that Israeli intelligence didn't know about Russian hacking of the American election. And I realized that there had been a whole deal with Adelson and Netanyahu and moving the thing. I am a Jew, but I can't stand extremist authoritarian cultism, whether it's Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, or Hindu, whatever. I'm for love. I'm for truth. I'm for treat others as you want to be treated. So that's my position. And I can only say that dictators, fascists, they want to take everyone else's rights away, and they want to control through fear. So the worst thing that people can do is self-censor and go along with things politely, which is what James Carville was saying, like, just sit back, they'll implode. No, that's the worst advice I can imagine anyone who is aware of what's happening to do. We need to be verbal. We need to speak out. We need to, again, for me, the critical thing is freedom of mind. And I say it's your mind and only you should control it. There should be an internal locus of control for your decision making. And pay attention to your phones. Are you spending hours and hours and hours in information silos where it's just draining your energy and your life force? It's like, no. The media, social media, and phones are a tool we should use that will help improve our lives. And we really need to rethink what's happening here, that we never had data privacy legislation, that the big tech people didn't want government regulation. They didn't want Harris to be elected because there would be checks and balances. There would be lawsuits against all the harm that they're doing. So they backed the Trump who say, you don't need fact checking. You can do whatever you want to people. And what some people like Bannon are realizing is they may have their own agenda to remake the world where they're in charge and not where governments are in charge. And I think I've said this in a previous live stream. If I was going to bet on what Putin or Xi would do, they would arrest Musk if he lived in Russia or China, and they would sit him down and say, "You're signing over all of your stuff to us, or you're going to jail for life, or we're just going to kill you. What would you like to do?" And guess what? He would sign it over, and that's what I'm predicting is going to happen if Musk doesn't get that and Zuckerberg doesn't get that. But they have their own agenda, and I cite a book called Tech Agnostic by Harvard and MIT humanist chaplain Greg Epstein. That's all about the cult of Silicon Valley and focusing on people like Musk. I highly recommend that book. And check out my interview with Greg Epstein. That's on my Substack, as Stephen Hassan. How would you briefly talk about brainwashing in communist China? How would I briefly talk about it? Well, we know the work that was done that helped me get out of the Moonies was about Mao's thought reform programs. The modern China is different now because they are a surveillance country where they have everybody is under the thumb of the Communist Party, and they influence Chinese even who've left the country to not say anything against Xi and the Communist Party because they threaten their family and friends who are still in mainland China. So, but I would cite, come onto my Substack, read my interviews with Robert J. Lifton and his 8 criteria of brainwashing that was first written in 1961 in his seminal book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. And I have many interviews with Lifton. He's unfortunately unwell. He's in his mid-90s now. I asked him for another interview, and he had to decline, unfortunately. But learn about the criteria of brainwashing. My BITE model of authoritarian control, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control stands up in terms of if you're doing these four things to create an identity that's dependent and obedient, then you have the recipe of brainwashing or mind control. I see Sheila Wade says Veterans Capital March on the 14th. Thank you, Sheila. Do you know that all of a lot of the civil servants who've been fired from the federal government are veterans? That they're undoing veterans' rights? So I think this march in 2 days is huge. It's very important. Also, I had the opportunity and pleasure to interview Christopher Goldsmith, who has an organization, Veterans Against Fascism, and I believe it's Task Force Butler. I listened to his messaging. I think he's very knowledgeable. He was having his people infiltrate right-wing extremist groups. And now that a lot of these extremists were unconditionally pardoned by Trump, he's necessarily ramping up to get more and more veterans involved with fighting against fascism. And frankly, I think Bannon has been planning, and Flynn has been planning on a civil war, like a violent civil war. And my worry regarding the firing of the top judges in the military might lead to Hegseth ordering people to fire on peaceful protesters. And all of our family and friends who are vets, will they fire and kill their family and friends because Trump orders them to? Or would they say no? And I'm hoping, because they swore an oath to the Constitution not to follow a president. And so I think it's going to be very highly dependent. And I've seen General McMaster on 60 Minutes speaking about the dangers of Donald Trump. He was there as an appointee of Trump in the White House. It's going to be critical for wise military experts to get much more involved now in how do we preserve the Constitution? How do we preserve liberty and freedom for all? Let's see, Michael D'Souza Cruz, your blog on neurodivergence, autism, and psychology today was very good. I feel more needs to be looked into this issue. People really need to be educated on neurodivergence. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I agree. And I have many friends who are neurodiverse. I find them absolutely brilliant and fascinating and quirky, but wonderful people. And I can say that folks on the spectrum, high functioning folks, they love the influence continuum and BITE model. When I interviewed the world's authority on Asperger's, Tony Atwood, and showed him this and ethical influence to unethical, and these are the criteria to watch out for, he said, of course, people who are Aspies are going to love this because it gives them a framing for understanding information that's coming at them. Oh, this is informed consent. Oh, this person's a liar. Oh, person is an ethical, accountable leader. This person's a malignant narcissist who's only interested in themselves. It gives them a framework that helps steer them in a healthy direction. Let's see, Tam Jules, I'm curious about your thoughts on Musk's father saying he named Elon after Werner von Braun's book, 1953, The Mars Project, who was a rocket scientist for the Nazi Party. Your thoughts on his ideology? Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking about that. I wish I could sit down with Elon Musk, with my friend John Atack, the world's authority on Scientology, and one of the most brilliant people I know, who I believe is neurodiverse. I wish we could sit down with Elon Musk for 3 days and talk, because I think we could help him a lot. But it would really be dependent on his family and friends to convince Elon to turn off his phone and sit down and meet with us voluntarily. And I think he might do it if he was appealed to by the right people at the right time in the right way. And the other thing about Elon that I worry about is all of his ketamine use and psychedelics use, because my sense is that he's been radicalized himself. So that there's a whole subject of that. But back to the ideology about Mars, the fixation on Mars. Neurodiverse people have often fixated on things, railroad trains. I have a friend who recently passed away, he was a dentist. He was obsessed with collecting dental instruments, historical dental instruments throughout time. It's cool. But anyway, what do I think about Musk prioritizing going to Mars over saving the world and saving our climate so people can live and inhabit the earth? I think it's horrible. I think it's misplaced. And for me, I like my human body, and I'm not wanting to put my consciousness into an android robot, and for the space travel to Mars and live in an inhospitable planet. I don't know, just me. Hans Kong, what do you think is more important, calling it out as a cult or taking care not to alienate supporters and those who don't want to understand? Great question. Don't call it out as a cult if you're talking to people in the cult. When I was a Moonie, if you were telling me, Steve, you're in a cult, do you think I would have helped me to reality test? It wouldn't. It would drive me deeper in. Asking me, oh, you're in the Moon Organization. Tell me, what were you doing before you ever heard the Moon Organization existed? I'd say I was a creative writing major, writing poetry at Queens College. Oh, fascinating. So you like words, you like to read books? Yes, I love to read books. I love, my creative, work. So tell me, how many poems have you written in the last 2.5 years? And then I would have been like, I've been too busy for God. Oh, what a shame that you dedicated your life to learning about English and being creative. That's interesting. Don't you miss reading books? That would have made me think. So the point is, don't get into a persuasion model. Get into a empowering people to think for themselves and reality test model. And as I was saying, you can talk about the Chinese communists as a cult and as a brainwashing cult. You can talk about pimps and traffickers as a cult. And a lot of people got converted to Trumpism and MAGism by QAnon and their anti-trafficking appeals. So if they got involved with Trump by fighting trafficking, talk about trafficking. Talk to sex trafficking survivors. Talk to labor trafficking experts. That's what's going to help give them some reality checking. David Wicklund, it feels like we're all coming under one big business pyramid scheme type cult. Yes. With a lot of the necessary social safety nets being cut. Yes. I worked in bankruptcy law, and it's looking like we are near. Yes, unfortunately. And so pyramid schemes are mind control cults where they persuade people to invest their time and energy into an MLM, a multi-level marketing group. And guess what I've been saying for years? Crypto is a multi-level marketing scheme. And the people who create the top of the pyramid, they're going to make a fortune with all the suckers buying in the Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies. It's going to make the rich even richer, but it has no value. But the goal is to subvert the US dollar and the US economy and the sovereignty of the United States power in the world. And Europe is rightfully freaking out. Canada is rightfully freaking out. And I can't stay silent. That's why I'm doing live streams, and I want people to read my books, listen to my podcasts. I interviewed Joe Zimhart on Monday. It came out. He was an ex-member of Agni Yoga and Church Universal and Triumphant. And it turns out Putin was in that cult, Agni Yoga. Turns out Michael Flynn was praying from Elizabeth Clare Prophet's Ascended Masters I Am ideology. It's like, learn about this stuff, start sharing it with family, friends, colleagues. Let's get some big influencers educated, people with resources and big followings. Let's have online courses. Let's generate awareness. Yeah, and as far as bankruptcy goes, we have a federal budget discussion in the Senate. And so the question is whether or not the Democrats will stop the budget that Mike Johnson has passed in the House. It was a very close vote. Remains to be seen. But the key is going to be turning the GOPs that have kissed the ring of Trump and helping them realize that they're betraying the trust their voters put in them. They're betraying their wives, their husbands, their children, their grandchildren, and they're going to be forever seen as on the wrong side of history. And they need to get a backbone and stand up and say, no, this is wrong. There's no such thing as alternative facts. What Trump is saying is a lie. So that was the thing that helped wake me up in my deprogramming. The final straw that broke the camel's back, proverbially, was my ex-Mooney deprogrammers handing me one of the Unification Church propaganda, where Moon was speaking to congressmen and senators, and they just said, "Hey, Steve, read this and tell us what you think." And I'm reading this document. I know it's the group's, printed pamphlet. And Moon is talking about how surprised he is that Americans could even imagine a Korean could brainwash an American, because he respects Americans so much. And I had been with Moon in person for 2 years, listening to him diss Americans and talk about how Koreans are the master race. And when I was asked that question for the first time, and that was after I learned about Chinese communist brainwashing, I was meeting with the ex-members, I thought to myself, what a liar. And as soon as I allowed myself that negative thought, my brain kicked into gear. I said, if he's a liar, then he's not the Messiah. He's not the man of God that I thought he was. If he's a liar, that means he's not trustworthy. And as soon as I put those pieces together in my mind, it was like a light turning on. I describe it in Combating in chapter 2. It's like being in a dark room and someone opens up the window shades and all of a sudden the sunlight comes in and you're like, oh, there's life outside there. And what have I been doing? Not everyone has an instant where their mind opens up, but a lot of people have a tipping point where it does. And once that bubble got burst, I could never get in the Moonies again or any mind control cult. I was so ashamed and embarrassed and confused, and I wanted to understand, how did they hack my brain? And now you're meeting me 49 years full time as a mental health professional. Um, and I've answered the questions, a lot of the questions that I've had over the decades. Neuropilot, speaking of military, my friends find it interesting that in OCS or boot camp, a DI spends the first hours explaining their responsibilities to the recruits, not the other way around. I've never been in the military, so that's new information for me. Thank you. There is a chain of command in the military. I think it's necessary, but I don't think the military does authoritarian brainwashing and mind control. They definitely, in boot camp, control behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions, and they want to train a military identity that understands the system of law and justice in the military, but it's what is known in psychology as ego syntonic versus ego dystonic, whereas the Moonies, my Moonie identity, thought the real me was evil and satanic. That's ego dystonic. A military identity likes who they were before, still loves their family and friends and their values, knows that they're getting paid. They have a contract for a set amount of time that they can time out, serve honorably, and exit or re-enlist. So, and there's a whole system of justice that was set up to prevent abuses of power like that. Let's see. Mitch says, "Hi, Dr. Hassan. It's profoundly sad what Trump is doing to eviscerate democracy from within. It's going to terminate Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. We've known this for many, many years, that the GOP wants to vote big tax cuts to billionaires, and who often don't even pay taxes, or the corporations don't pay taxes. And they want to undercut all of the safety net systems that I'm on Social Security, I'm on Medicare. It's not cool. But that's the plan. So people should not be surprised, and they should get out and protest now and not wait. If they hear about local protests, join it. And as far as if you have funds to donate, think hard and long. Where's the best use of your money? Where does it feel like the best investment of your capital to help advance it? Because there are some great lawyers, Democracy Forward, and Sky Perryman is doing a lot of great work, and there's little actors like me going, hey, I'm trying to find 3,500 subscribers for my Substack who are willing to donate $8 a month so that I can put my attention and develop courses and books on how to talk to MAGA folks. But without that support, I need to take clients to earn money to pay my people to do this. So it's a matter of, will I get the support financially to apply my expertise in the most cost-effective manner to help the most amount of people? And that's another reason why I'm doing these lives, in addition to my podcasts, in addition to my blogs. So think about it. And let's see, another thing. Section 8 applications are now frozen in Los Angeles County, and SSI and SSDI applications are no longer accepted. The VA has fired psychiatric RNs. It's terrible. What can I say? It's terrible. And regarding where you get your news from, a lot of the most trustworthy sources are now not aligned with corporate media. So I subscribe to something called Ground News, which reports on a topic and says this is what progressive media says about it. This is what conservative right-wing media says about it. This is what the straight and narrow media says about it. So I can make up my own mind on any topic. And honestly, I don't allow myself to get overloaded with too much information that I can't do anything about, because I want to be effective. I want to be able to sleep at night. And but I really do believe understanding brainwashing and mind control and what techniques are useful to help people to get out of that silo, out of that bubble and reality test and make their own decisions again. I really see this as a critical piece of what we need to do going forward. I see Tam Jules says education is key, but Trump is canceling it. Yes, we mentioned at the beginning the Department of Education fired half of its staff. Russell Bertrand's quote, how fascism starts: first they fascinate the fools, then they silence the intelligent. And the silencing process, I see the Civil War. There's a lot of people who are very smart who's written about the times they were living in. And as much as we can learn from history, we're living in a very unique moment of history, because the digital powers that exist today, the power in a smartphone has never existed before. AI that is being developed has never existed before. Quantum computing has never existed before. And we have to really think long and hard. If we don't want to be subjects of a dictatorship, of a fascist, autocratic country, what's within our power to do? How are we going to organize? How are we going to do resistance? And honestly, I'm hoping it's not going to come down to militaristic situations, but in historical terms, it has in the past. And I keep remembering some of the extremists like Alex Jones saying, we have the guns, we have the AR-15s, you libtards don't have them, we have them. And I'm like, shit, he's right. They have them, we don't. Let's see. We have a few more minutes. David says, it seems the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum are all predicated on falsely created fake value. I agree. It's displacement undermining what really has value with fake values and disingenuousness. David, I agree. And I've done many things on multi-level marketing, commercial cults. There are documentaries that have been done. There have been conferences with people from around the world talking about how many people have been hurt. And Angie Wheeler says, I love independent journalists. That's what we need. People that aren't making decisions based on who our sponsors are. And I listen often to the New York Times audio cast in the morning, and they're being sponsored now by the American petroleum industry. And do you really think that's not going to affect their decisions of what stories they present and in what way they present them? And I can say the New York Times has been horrible on the topic of mind control, brainwashing cults. They've been great in other topic areas over the decades, but I've been out for 49 years, and I honestly think they've sucked at covering the issue of how the mind works and how the mind can get hacked, and talking about a group as an authoritarian group as opposed to a sect, SECT, which is the politically correct term for mind control cult. Benjamin says, hello, all in the chat. Hello, Stephen. I'm thankful for your work every day. Thank you, Benjamin. I'm doing this work for everybody's sake, and it really means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the folks on my Freedom of Mind team to hear from you saying your work matters, keep it up, do more. So thank you. And please subscribe to my Substack. Please, if you know influencers who have shows or whatever, tell them, hey, why not have the author of The Cult of Trump on? Or why not have the ex-Mooney mind control expert on? I'm still shocked that Bill Maher has said no to when people have suggested me as a guest. I don't understand what's the resistance. Katie Couric interviewed me, and then she got piled on by the right wing, and I haven't heard from her since. But let's reach out to influencers and say, hey, what about this topic, this expertise about brainwashing and mind control and de-radicalization? So as we wrap up, I want to say the next week's podcast is with a former cult member of the Kabbalah Center. Debbie Haskey Leventhal was brought in by her parents at the very beginning of the Kabbalah Center. This was the cult that's been made famous by Madonna and other celebrities who got sucked into it. And she left and is a professor of business in Australia and wrote a fantastic book about her journey coming out of the Kabbalah Center going, who am I? What do I believe? What do I want to do with my life? And she is a great model. So look forward to that podcast and interview that'll be out on Monday. And thanks for putting up my books. And when people ask me, what should I read first? My recommendation is read the foundational book first, Combating Cult Mind Control. Then read the book on how to help family and friends get out of cults. And then read The Cult of Trump. But you're an adult and you get to choose which book you want to read first. And they're all on audio, by the way, if you like to listen. And with that, I see we're at 2, and I think we're going to wrap up. But stay tuned and subscribe to my email and my Substack. Thanks. Take care.